well, what is therapy? What is actually supposed to be happening in therapy? Because I have heard this. I've heard this from people, but I feel like I'm thinking of Africans, just either family or friends, when describing what therapy
Yeah.
is. And I'll just let you say what therapy is and what it isn't, just to clarify.
Yeah. So to like my parents' age, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Um, Therapy. At the very basic level, it is really just a space to talk and reflect in a way where you can be very open and transparent with somebody who is there, who cares. And I think maybe sometimes the part about why am I going to a stranger is what I've heard people get stuck on, especially like folks of the older generation that I've spoken to. It's like, why are you telling your business to a stranger? And for us to get to this point where I've, studied and I want to help heal other people and be part of the healing process of, yeah, of us around the world, is I do care about you as an individual and I want to see the best outcomes from you. And if I can play a part in that process, then that's what I'm going to do. And as best as I can as a human being, will try to be an impartial individual in that process. And I say impartial because it's like I'm here with you right now. I don't know the people that you're talking to me about, and I'm really not focused on their role as much in the process as like how it has impacted you and how you are dealing with everything and coping with some of those things that are going on and wanting to help you to figure out how you can better regulate if there are things that have triggered you, better communicate within your family so that you are understood if you're feeling misunderstood or you're feeling like you are not able to move past points of tension with folks that you love. If you are feeling like, oh, this might be seen as crazy or weak or um, unacceptable or typically like something that you might get judged for. A therapist is there to be somebody who is an objective listener, somebody who can offer some wisdom, some tools, some space for you to process that stress. To also help you see patterns that are coming up. Like if you are actually honest with the person that you are talking to, like this licensed mental health clinician, they can help to see and recognize patterns that then can help you go back into your daily life and practice better ways of living. Because sometimes, you know, if you're only giving your perspective and not able to like give it transparently with the full truth, then you may not be growing on the outside because you're not being fully honest with what's going on. And the point of therapy is to be able to grow, feel better, heal, and move through the world in a way where yeah, we're just all contributing to making it a better place because it really does start with us. I know that sounds just like super cliche, but we're learning to be better stewards of the mind that God has given us so that we can also, love our neighbors as ourselves, which is one of the commands that God has given us.
Yeah, and I will kind of double down on my question just to get a little bit more into the details, but I appreciate you just clarifying what therapists are doing, just having a
Mm,
space, providing a space for people to kind of share what they're going through, what's going on in their mind, what's going on around them.
yeah.
And you mentioned how therapists are trained to do so, because what if someone says, well, I can just go to my spouse or my best friend or a family member and still have
Mhm.
that space to share? So, what's the difference between doing that and going to a therapist?
That training element that you mentioned, I would say, because I also think of therapy as kind of like a health checkup, but for your mind and emotions. I mean, you may be able to go to your friend and ask them about a physical ailment, but you're probably going to trust a doctor a physician or physical therapist who's been trained to have a specific eye to recognize those things, including the nuances that come along with physical health. So, in the same way with mental health, somebody who's trained for that, like they're willing to be there to sit with you and kind of go through all those things. And because we have studied the mind, behavior, larger sociological constructs and different theories. And we talk to a lot of people and we're keen on that. And a lot of us do research specifically for those areas. So, like for myself, I'm, a licensed psychologist. And I also say that the people that I am most drawn to support are folks who have gone through adverse childhood experiences or certain traumas, and those affect them across their lifespan, and folks who are, of African descent, Black people, because that's what I studied and that's what I have dedicated, part of my life's work to doing and knowing better. So I'm able to pick up on a lot of other things that a friend may not be able to pick up on because they're not entering into that conversation prepared to, do that. So I think it's just more of like the holistic approach that somebody who's trained from that perspective can take. And then the other thing also too is that therapy is not just for you to initiate when there's something wrong, like similarly to how you don't go to hopefully you don't go to the doctor only when you start to feel sick or have an ailment, but you can go to maintain that wellness. So you may feel like, oh, yeah, like I'm fine, there's nothing wrong. But we go through so many seasons of life. I mean, I'm only in my 30s, but I already feel like I've lived so many lives. And I know that having a licensed mental health clinician to support my journey, whether it's transitions, things that may come up that I won't even be prepared for. I think it's healthy to have that if folks are able to make space for that and to afford it. I think it's just ways to make sure that we can figure out how to live with more peace and patience and joy. The older generation hasn't always had the privilege to be able to do that because they have been so focused on survival. And so now what we see maybe is like a lot of that built up stuff comes out in how they speak to their children or how they relate to people at work or the things that they're not able to tolerate that may not seem as big to other people, but those are some things that we can always just work on as human beings so that we can be better to each other.
Yeah, and that was kind of a good analogy of going to the doctor. So if there's something physically wrong, you go to the doctor to try to figure out the problem. And
Hmm.
then you're not also just going when there's something wrong, hopefully just to have those quarterly check-ins or however often. But it's the same thing with therapy of having those check-ins mentally, and
Yeah.
then going to someone who is trained to actually check in with you mentally.
Hmm.
So with therapy, do kind of want to stay on this topic a little bit. How would you say, or what are some good, I guess, traits to look for in a therapist? Just
Mm.
because I have had experiences, a couple in therapy where I don't really feel like this is what's supposed to happen. I have
Yeah.
had an experience where I was sharing about something personally, a relationship that had ended, and then the therapist did start to talk about their relationship that also ended. So then it kind of became
Mm.
a conversation and
Yeah.
advice based on, well, this happened to me, or don't do this because when I did this. And it was
Yeah.
just really something, I don't know if traumatic is a good word. I'm like, no, no,
Yeah.
no. So, what would you say are some good things to look for in a therapist and then some things to watch out for? So, therapy is good, but then it's like there are also therapists who are good therapists.
Yeah, and that's that human element in, coming out there too, where the person maybe is not being very aware of, how to use the space. Um, I would say there's just off the top of my head some things that I'm thinking about is that when you're looking for a therapist, you want someone who's not just qualified, so having the letters behind their name or that license, which I'm gonna just actually let me emphasize that first. Like that is very important to find somebody who has that training and you can verify that they have that training. Typically folks who are licensed professional counselors, so that's LPC, licensed clinical social workers, licensed psychologists. There's many others that I may be missing, and I'm so sorry because I'm like trying to think of it off the top of my head, but folks who are licensed in that particular field to be able to provide mental health services. Um, and then specifically therapy, because some people, like there are, for example, folks who are psychiatrists or they have a medical doctorate, but they may not be trained to provide therapy. And those are also questions you could just ask the person themselves too about their training. And so, yeah, going back to what I was saying, not just qualified, but also somebody who is attuned, somebody who you feel like can meet you where you are, honor your values, and be able to see your full humanity. So, I feel like values, and I talk about this a lot, even when I do like the executive coaching and organizational consulting stuff, because as individuals, brands, businesses, like having values is a really good, what do they call it? North Star or blue, like a compass for us to be able to ground ourselves in what am I going to say yes or no to across anything in life, relationships, I don't know, food, whatever weird decisions we're making, having values is important. So, being able to find a therapist that has values that you maybe align with or can appreciate. Um, Somebody who, for example, you feel like could be a safe space, somebody who respects your cultural or religious beliefs. The person may not share the same religion as you, but they can still be able to be a really good like mirror or guide for you in your process because they have that respect and they have that perspective to be able to offer you. And then there are people who specifically label themselves as like Christian counselors too. So there's that. I would say somebody who's a good listener, if they're not rushing you, if they're curious about your story and not just your symptoms. I think that's important because some people may get a little bit, diagnostic happy or unfortunately, sometimes when you're working with clinicians who are within the medical system who take insurance, sometimes there can be that expectation that after a certain number of sessions, like I have to give you a diagnosis or I have to, yeah, I have to give you a diagnosis. And sometimes they might lean then now towards giving you medication, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that when it's done in a thoughtful way and then it's paired with that good talk therapy. But yeah, just some stuff to consider there. And then somebody who it really just kind of depends on your approach because some people may be very solution focused in their real life, and that's kind of what they want to get out of therapy. And some people are more process oriented and they want to be able to have a therapist that can collaborate with them. So having an idea of who you are a little bit can help too. I know that's part of the, what we discover in therapy is a bit more about our identity. But if you have a few of those, just like basic understandings of who you are, like what type of conversationalist you are, and you can maybe even asking your friends some of those things can help you now go into looking for a therapist and be like, okay, if this person has solution focus listed on their theoretical orientation, then I'm not going to choose them. And that is so some websites you can go on and the person may list their approach to therapy. And that could be an example of an approach that they have. Or if they're somebody who is a behaviorist, that is somebody who is only going to be looking at like what triggered this behavior, what happened after this behavior, and what can we do to help you respond differently. So, being aware of some of those things, and that can come from doing your research by reading that person's website. or asking that person questions. Some therapists do offer consultation sessions, like free consultation sessions beforehand, so you can get a feel for that. But also, if anything is happening in those sessions, that is a good space for you to practice asserting yourself and sharing, the perspective that you're having or what's not working for you, what's working. And I know that could be nerve-wracking for some people. But if you do not feel safe enough to do that, and not with the nervousness, but I mean like you feel like your therapist might respond in a different type of way, that is also an indicator that maybe this is not a good fit for you because that person has not maybe created that space, or you just don't feel like you've reached that point where you can communicate that. And so that might be an indicator that, yeah, either I'm not ready for this process, or I need somebody else in this process, or maybe I need to push myself a little bit more. But when you're feeling, unsafe, not heard, that should be like a really big, red flag, because that's what it is. It's talk therapy. And I'm sure there's so many other things too that I'm like missing, but culturally responsive is another one that I think of. And for me, that just means that you don't have a therapist who's like a one size fits all model. They're going to recognize your worldview, your identity, whether there's spirituality, whether community is a big part of who you are. Right now, I think with, I mean, it's always been going on, but stuff that's going on with immigration and ICE, there are probably people who are in therapy, or people who probably even dropped out of therapy because they felt like they weren't going to be safe in those settings. But having somebody who can recognize, like, hey, in these sessions, I'm probably not going to be taking notes the same way that I would take notes with somebody who is a full citizen and has those type of privileges. I think those are important considerations for us as mental health clinicians, but also things that would be okay for you to ask as somebody who's seeking therapy to try to learn what that person's perspective might be. So even asking them like how culture shapes the way that they approach therapy with clients. How does faith approach the way that you do that? How does fill in the blank of whatever it is approach the way that you provide care for your clients, just to get an idea of how that um, person supports their people, and maybe what potential biases could be coming up for them that may not be ones that you are comfortable with um, entering into the relationship, therapeutic relationship, because of.
Yeah, I think those are a lot of helpful tips. It kind of sounds like dating and seeing, okay, is this a good
It is, it
match?
is, it is. And it's always okay. Like you don't have to stick to a therapist just because made that decision. I mean, people may take it personally, but it is for you. Like the process is for you. So be comfortable. Use that as an opportunity to practice the way that you can, again, like I said, advocate for yourself and take care of yourself. Make sure that it's somebody who's willing to learn alongside you, somebody who acknowledges your experiences, including the context of where we are as a world. If they're not able to acknowledge historical traumas and systemic realities, then it really may not even be as productive, because talk therapy isn't going to fix, the impacts of systemic oppression, but at least somebody who can be able to work within those systems and acknowledge that and validate your lived experience.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some really, really helpful tips. So hopefully anyone listening kind of took that into consideration. And I think that's an important reminder that you don't have to stay with
Yeah.
with a therapist, even though it kind of can be nerve-wracking to just not show up,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
and try a different one. But yeah, it is definitely for you at the end of the day. Just to kind of wrap up and look at the big picture, just because I know that this is the probably the most important of, okay, what can I do? So what
Hmm.
would you say are some practical ways to stay mentally healthy, just
Hmm.
general, that anyone can kind of take from this conversation? And then in regards to mental health, what would you say overall that the big picture is?
Yeah. Okay, practical ways. When you ask that, well, the first thing that I think of is, okay, myself. Come to yourself, and as we're learning ourselves in, just the journey of life and relating with other people, um, a few that come to mind. One is emotional check-in. So pausing to reflect and ask ourselves, what am I feeling? What might I need right now? And I think that can be a really hard question to answer sometimes, because I've experienced it too, where I'm like, I feel like I'm uneasy, or this could even look like, I say emotional check-in, but it can also even look like physical, because for some people, we hold tension in different places. So like in our shoulders, or we might get that really like queasy feeling in our stomach. That might be anxiety that you're experiencing. Um, and so yeah, that those emotions manifest in our bodies in very different ways, and sometimes very serious ways. And there's a book called The Body Keeps Score. And I also use that phrase just like quite often, because our body does hold tension. I mean, just even the way that God created us, to where we have um, hormones called cortisol that is connected to stress. And when our cortisol is so high for an extended period of time, our body can go into shock. And that has medical implications to it as well. So just being able to stop and check in with ourselves, where we are emotionally, how we're feeling physically, there can be people that can support that process as well, to help you figure out what is going on with your body. Resting is another very practical way. So, honoring the limit that your body has. The reason it's important to do those check ins is because you know the rhythm that your body flows well in. And then you can also tell sometimes when you're starting not to feel that way. But it's also good to not push ourselves, because I feel like as Black people, we tend to be able to just carry a lot. Like we're able to carry a lot, and part of that is not, it's not the best, it's not normal. A lot of that probably goes back to how our ancestors had to live through life, and pummel their immune systems to be able to just survive and get to where we are now, and still can come out and be joyful and innovative beings. But it's not okay to be moving in that way. So yeah, honoring our limits, knowing what those are, and resting. And another practical one that I feel like connects to both of those is boundaries. Like, what are your boundaries? What are things that you um, know that you would feel comfortable with saying yes to, that nourish you, that offer you that peace, that fill you up, and where you feel like you're living in your purpose. But even as you're doing that, like there might be some things that are just too much, and you need to set lines. And also, people may not respect your boundaries. Oftentimes we do just kind of like as human beings may be in modes where we're taking, and we're teaching people what's okay for them to do to us and for us. So having those boundaries for ourselves is important, and making sure that you're, safekeeping or gatekeeping. um, so yeah, what you'll say yes and what you'll say no to. Community care is another practical way, for people who do have people in their lives, or maybe some folks are nervous to reach out to people to ask them for help because they don't want to look a certain way, or they don't want to be a burden, or whatever the reason is. I think that we are in a time in society where, yes, a lot of people are going through a lot of things. And I, what I've gathered from just like social media and conversations with my friend groups is that people really want community, and in very active ways, not just passive, like, oh, yeah, I know this person, but reaching out, connecting, letting yourself be supported. Healing happens a lot when we're in relationship with people. And it doesn't, you don't always have to be doing things or going to paid activities, but going over somebody's house and just like helping them cook, or watching them cook, or helping them watch their kid, or I don't know, going on a walk, things that are free, that only require us to be in space, and in each other's presence. And for some people, that just can be like sitting in silence with folks. There's folks who, you know, probably feel like they are not cared for because they are either mothers and they've lost touch with their friends, or they're only siblings and they also live alone. And so they're not really a priority, quote unquote, to a lot of other folks. But just being aware of ways that we can just be with each other, and how much of, um, and not minimizing how important that can actually be, but also giving each other grace because there is a lot going on, and giving ourselves grace. Um, just because somebody doesn't respond to a message, in the time that you expect, or isn't able to show up how they typically have been able to show up, doesn't mean that they don't, care about you. Like, people are going through a lot, and I think those are opportunities again to deepen community, because now you can have conversation, later about, well, what does support look like for you in a way that might be helpful. And maybe you don't know, but those are questions that we can start asking ourselves, so that we're able to, create or cultivate a community of people that are responsive in ways that matter to us. Um, and then the last one, which is probably one of the first ones I should have said, is, spiritual grounding. So, in whatever ways you practice, like that prayer, meditation, nature walks, making space for time with yourself and the creator, because that recharges us on a different level.
Yeah, I think those answers were very well put together and very practical, and even reminded me, like, yeah, these are things I can be doing more often, of just hanging out with family or friends. And
Hmm.
I think even sometimes if I'm like, I just don't feel like, but then when I get into that space with people that I care about, it is actually good, and it's
Yeah.
helpful. And I even think back to Genesis 1, how God created us, and he looked at the first human being he created and said, it's not good that man is alone. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like
Hmm.
setting that tone of that we were created to be together. That's essentially how we started off as human beings. So kind of
Yeah.
like getting back to that. So
Yeah. And also rested on the seventh day. I rested, like, looked at everything, said it was good, and still rested, and did that in a way to model for us that that is something that we need to make time for. Like, if God can make time for that, and, implore us to do the same thing, I mean, he's probably on to something, and we should also like follow, suit for that.
yeah, yeah, that is so good. And I really just appreciate those answers and thoughts. I think a lot of a lot of wisdom came through what you were saying, and I was just kind of, taking that in. And I really enjoy conversations like this, because it kind of helps me get back to, okay, this is what you need to be doing, or this is kind of the path to continue on. And hopefully everyone that listened was very very encouraged,
Yeah.
and got something out of this. Is there anything else that you wanted to say in wrapping up, remind people, or share about mental health, Robina?
Yeah, I realized I didn't answer your question about the big picture, so I can wrap up in that way. As to me, the big picture when it comes to mental health, um, there's yeah, there's healing. That's an element of it, which is a journey, like it's a never-ending, thing that's going on for us, because as long as we're living, there's always things that are going to happen that will impact us as human beings. Um, there's restoration, which I think we talked about some of that when we talked about, connecting to our homeland, and intergenerational joy, and the things that we have within us that are not just thinking about them from an illness or ailment perspective. And then liberation. I think liberation is the biggest picture of it all, individually and collectively, because that is what helps us to like just reclaim wholeness in a world that really fragments us, especially as African Black people. Um, yeah, just moving back more into that communal type of living where we allow each other to be well, we love on each other. Um, we're healing lineages and we're reshaping culture to hopefully be closer to what God intended for it to look like, which is the most sustainable way to live. I think we've tried so many things to make it make sense, but taking care of like following that command that God gave us to love our neighbors as ourselves, I think is the essence of um, what mental health and liberation can look like for us. So yeah, I think that is the main thing that I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And this like a smaller scale of the work of God. If you think about the work of God, it's restoration. We think back to
Mm-hmm.
the beginning and how now the world is broken, and you talked about spirituality. Like that's the way that we can essentially get back to who we're created to be, like kind of tap into ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
also recognize that we are created beings. So spending time with the one who created us gives us a understanding of who we
Exactly.
are, what's going on around us. So I love that you said liberation because it's like on a smaller scale of God's work.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
thank you, Rabina. I really
Yeah.
appreciate this. This was awesome. And I hope that everyone enjoyed this conversation. And I definitely should have you on because I feel like we could have gone on a little bit longer. So to
Yeah.
have you on again. So,
Yeah, even that part about what to like how to identify therapists and things like that. I think that could be a whole episode, mini episode, because I'm thinking of more things now where I'm like, oh, this, yeah, I feel like that is a whole thing because people have had very not good experiences with therapists, and that hurts my heart because then it, yeah, it does make people feel like I'm not, that's not, therapy's not for me, and I hate that people think that way. So yeah, so many different things that could come from the stuff that we already talked about.
yeah, I will definitely reach out to you again if that's okay with you. I know that we're kind of like have a lot on our calendar.
Hmm.
But I think sometime in the future we should do an episode on that because I feel like I don't know, there's so many questions and thoughts that I have that probably other people have as
Yeah,
well. So that would be
yeah,
good.
yeah, I'm open to that.
All right.
Mhm, thank